Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is all Rachel's fault. She's just showing her mainly Cattleya types under a grow light. Interesting stuff. And while I'm at it, big thank you for the Facebook response to my request on certain individual Cattleya types. Thank you. That's looking it up in the book. I have some scale around the base of some of my Cattleyas, but in such low numbers I'm not panicking. And it's difficult to say in those areas whether they're even dead or not, but you know my saying, I'm quite happy to kill things twice, just in case. But I have some, I'll describe it as evil stuff. I'm not going to say the word out loud, because in this particular country it's actually an offence to even own it, let alone use it in anger. So it came through a back door via somebody else. So I didn't do the dirty deed, I've just bought some off the guy. But it is evil stuff. It's a very, very old-fashioned pesticide, fungicide, any side you think of. That's long since been banned, quite honestly. Due to overuse and its effect on the environment, as normal. But because it came from the US, the instructions are, I won't say complicated, but I will say a pain in the proverbial, because it's all pints and gallons and teaspoons. Well, that's all US measurements for a start, which I haven't got. So I've had to play around doing flipping conversions, which is a bit of a pain. But the basic dosage of this stuff, which says things like 1 pint in 100 gallons, that's pretty useful when you want to mix up a 1 litre spray. Anyway, we've been sitting with the computer doing the calculations, because otherwise I'd get a headache. And a recommended dosage works out at 1.5 teaspoons a gallon. Now I've had to do loads of conversions on this. First of all, we need to find out how many litres are in a US gallon and get that answer. And then we have to work out the percentage that 1 litre is of that said number of litres to get a percentage ratio to be able to use for the dilution. And then we have to find out how many millilitres there are in a US teaspoon, which is just under 5 ml, so that's quite easy to remember, and it's only a little bit under 5 ml, so 5 ml will do. So 1.5 teaspoons is obviously 7.5 ml, but then I've got to apply that would be 7.5 ml for a US gallon. So I've then got to apply my percentage ratio to that 7.5 ml to get how much to put in a litre. If people just worked in litres when it's liquids, life would be easy, worldwide, universal. Get it together, you lot. Anyway, we finally got down to somewhere around 2 millilitres per litre as a reasonable solution of this stuff. I haven't used it before. Apparently it stinks to high heaven, but nonetheless I'm going to mix up a litre. There's quite a few scale getting in round the base of my older Cattleya leaves, just at the base of the plant. They don't seem to have moved up into the newer leaves, or that particular section. There's none actually on the leaves, and that's the same with my Cattleya types. They're around the base, they're around the rhizome area and the base of the root section. Chances are there's some lurking down in the pots as well, on the roots and even on the media. Even on the inside of the pot, where I can't even see them. But nonetheless, this stuff is supposedly systemic, although in its basic form it's not. It's an instant killer. Kills anything that gets near it, and that can include me, so I need to be incredibly careful. But anyway, I'm going to mix up a litre of said stuff, apply it to the base of my Cattleya types. It's the holy clay pots that are guilty at the moment, and although they're not doing huge amounts of harm in that area, then they're not up the top of the pseudobulbs, and there's none on the leaves, so they're not making their way up the plant where they can do more noticeable damage, but nonetheless they can get in behind dormant eyes, and as new growths start, those eyes start to push away from the rhizome. They'll get down in that gap and destroy that new growth before it even takes off. So even on sturdy plants like Cattleyas down near the base, they can still do some harm. And I have actually noticed a few getting back onto a couple of my Tolumnias as well. So a litre spray should enable me to do the base of all the holy clay pots of those that are guilty. I mean, there are some that don't have a sign anywhere. Well, I'm not killing nothing, if you know what I mean. I do need to at least see some signs. I'll do the Tolumnias and I'll do the base of the Cattleyas, and a litre should be enough to do that. There's a couple of Oncidiums lurking where I noticed a few, so I'll give them a go if I can remember which ones it is. I'm not doing them all. Quite honestly, it could actually render this grow room uninhabitable for a while because of the stink. This is the advice I've got anyway, because the guy I got it from tried it in his place and he said I had to vacate the premises for a week till it sort of died down a bit. But he had really bad all sorts of stuff. He had some thrips, he had bad mealybug, he had aphids in there, and he had scale. And I said to him, "Well, have you been away for 6 months or something?" And he said, "No, I've just been lazy." Fair enough. But I've got anything that I would call anything remotely resembling an outbreak of anything, but there's a bit lurking around, and at this time of year they're not that active anyway. You know, the cooler temperatures are not good for the bugs either, so they're slow to breed, slower to spread and all that sort of stuff. But I'd like to take control now while they're in that state, well before the spring comes and they get their better conditions as well as my plants. So that's today's job. I'm not going to show any of this on film because I daren't get that chemical on film or mention it by name in case it gets out. It's just not on. But that's what's going to happen today. And yeah, the rest of today's video, getting that out of the way because I've talked too long about that anyway, the idea is to revisit some of the Dendrobiums, because I need to pick on some to go into this talk, and I need to film them over their stages. Now, the last big massive Dendrobium thing I did as they were going into thinking about winter rest and stuff, I've kept the clips. So I've got clips of some of, well, virtually all of them at that stage. I can now choose the ones I'm going to go into a lot more detail on, and the idea is to get one or some of each type in my categories, not the necessarily the categories in the books. But you've always heard me talking about sets. Well, some from each set, because the set determines their care in my terminology. And get another clip of those as they are now. So those that are winter resting types are now resting, yeah, but they're at the start of their rest. And I'll see where I go from there. I might try and set up a, I mean, I've got my black cloth here, which is because that area through the glass is tatty. And as a background it's not exactly ideal. Like when I film here, you've got all that rubbish in the background, which I can do without. But that black cloth only really works for smaller plants sat on that table, obviously when the heater's not there, and the fan's always in the shot as well. So I'm going to try and set myself up an environment where large hanging plants can be filmed against a black backdrop. Now it's a dull day today and it's raining, but it's nowhere near as dull as it has been over the last couple of days. So there's obviously bright areas, or the cloud's thinner, and I've got more than enough light to film today. So I'm going to try and get some of those clips, and I'll add them on to the end of this one. And when I get all these clips on the computer, I may well change my mind and do that as a separate entity. But anyway, I was listening to Rachel, and she put links to the bleach treatment that she once did. She did a bleach treatment and then an update, and the links are directly from her latest video on her Cattleyas, you know, now it's raining, on her Cattleyas under the grow light. And she referred to, the idea came from Ed. and how he had done it. And I think the plants in question actually were given to Rachel from Ed. So there's, you know, we're all incestuous, that's a lot. But Ed swears by that treatment, and because of his video on that, and the knowledge got out there basically, because I'd never heard, and I wouldn't have dreamt of putting bleach anywhere near what I consider delicate roots. But you know, it obviously works. Although I've seen one person that tried it and it didn't work. It didn't get rid of the scale. But then maybe it just wasn't strong enough. I must admit the solution that Rachel used, I'm surprised it didn't take her skin off. But being a gardener, she's probably got hands like mine. They'll put up with anything basically. They're not all soft and delicate with nail varnish. I don't mean me. But you know what I mean. Some people just have hard, resilient skin on their hands due to use basically. So yeah, I think Rachel had no problems anyway, despite not wearing gloves. My only problem with the bleach thing is the lack of preciseness about it. You know, there's quite a lot of different bleaches on the market. Some are an awful lot stronger than others. And so you've got quite a large variety in the thing you're starting with. And then you've got a bucket, you know, well, how much water's that then? Is it a big bucket, a medium bucket? And then you put some sploops of the bleach in until it froths up. It's very imprecise, if you see what I mean. And I would worry about a solution being strong enough to burn. Not necessarily my hands, but my delicate orchids. But nonetheless, having seen Rachel put a Phragmipedium into a solution that would have taken the fur off a kettle, let's put it this way, that was a very strong solution. And the plant survived and the treatment worked for what she was using it for. So I think if an orchid can survive that level of solution, you'd probably get away with a much weaker solution. But I haven't tried it, and because I've got this specifically precise stuff that I can measure precisely to hand, that's what I'm going to have a go at today. As I said, I daren't show the product itself, but let's just say it's a very, very old thing that was in wide use in nurseries, agriculture, you know, anywhere where pests and funguses and moulds and things actually lived, because it virtually kills everything. But it was very, very dangerous to both the food chain and wildlife, and you know, it was seriously damaging out in the environment, so it was a good job it got stopped. But in here is a controlled environment. This environment does not escape outwards, so I'm happy using it in here despite the smell. Anyway, I must get going because I have got those sort of things to do, and they all take time, and it is brightening up, so I would like to get some filming done while the light level's there. So I think I'll keep this separate. This will just go down as a chatty one about, you know, plans against bugs and other people's ideas about treatments and things, because certainly a lot of the pesticides that you can get now, they're so flipping weak. They really don't work that well, and my worry is always that if they don't do the job properly, that's when you start building up resistance. Because if they don't do the job properly and they only kill 90% of the bugs, that means 10% of the bugs survived. That's how the resistance starts. If the flipping stuff did its job properly, 0% would survive. There can then be no resistance. You see what I'm getting at? It needs to do the job. But, you know, we're not allowed to have such chemicals because we're not responsible adults, so it messes us up. And in the long run, it's going to mess everything up. You know, that's the long-term prognosis by Roger, is that pesticides that don't do the job properly will end up generating resistance because they don't do the job properly. So, you know, they're cutting their own throats really, because then that pesticide won't work anymore. And somebody's got to find another one. And that's got to have all the tests done and find out if it's dangerous to the environment and everything else. Quite honestly, most pesticides are dangerous in the environment out there in the open world. So anyway, that's today's plan, and best thing to do is get on with it. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Right, that's half the job done, and I've come to the conclusion that either that guy had a much more sensitive nose than me, or he's just a wuss. Because yes, it does smell and it's not very pleasant, but it's not so much that you've got to vacate the premises. I have got a feeling though that that smell drifting into the lounge when I'm sitting down, you know, quietly this evening might be a bit annoying, but I mean, if the worst comes to the worst, I can switch the extractor on and change the air in here with the door shut. But until this stuff dries, it's going to carry on smelling anyway, so no point in even attempting to do anything about it today. But yeah, it does whiff a bit. It reminds me of creosote, something you used to coat your fences up with and your sheds and stuff to make them sort of weatherproof. It's a very strong, not nice smell, but not revolting, if you know what I mean. But it reminds me of creosote. But whatever it is, I could do without it, but nonetheless, its functionality I need. So it's going to get used, whether it stinks or not. All good stuff.